Hi, good morning, and welcome to the 2024 Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. Before we get started, please do take a moment to read our anti-harassment policy in the chat box. So I'm Alexandra Alessandri.
And I'm Jennifer Torres.
And we are incredibly excited to spend this next hour with you talking about characters and character sketches and mapping and creating realistic characters for our stories. I think we're ready for our slideshow. Awesome. So as I mentioned, I'm Alexandra Alessandri, and I am the Colombian American author of several books for young readers, including my most recent middle grade novel, Grow Up, Luchi Zapata. And one of the things that has been true throughout my life has been that I've been a storyteller. And as an only child with about 52 cousins, give or take, and 15 aunts and uncles, I had a lot of family to draw from with details. And as I told stories to my cousins, I would draw from those details, their names, their character traits, to create characters in these stories that resonated with my cousins, that they felt real. And I have found that throughout the years, that has been true now in my own stories that I write for young readers just like you.
I love that. And I'm Jennifer Torres. I'm the Mexican-American author of more than a dozen books for young readers, including my most recent middle grade novel, Vega's Piece of the Sky. And I was a reader before I was a writer, probably like many of you. And when I started sort of playing with words and wanting to write my own stories, many of those early stories were really copycat versions of things that I had read and really admired and wanted my writing to be like. And that's okay. I think like any writing is really good practice, and becoming a good writer is, just you do by practicing writing and writing more and more. However, those early stories in a lot of ways kind of rang hollow because they weren't truly my stories. And it wasn't until I realized that the plots, the characters that I wanted to create needed to come from my heart and needed to come from my mind and perspective in order for them to really come to life for other readers. So I think we'll touch on that a little bit in this presentation about writing from your heart and drawing on from your own experiences in creating some characters. I'm going to hand it back to Alexandra to tell you a little bit more about her amazing book, which I also have.
Thanks. And I have Jennifer right here as well. I think we're ready for the next slide. But I love what you said, Jennifer, because I think it is absolutely true. And it's been a journey in learning that when really creating characters and stories that will feel real for readers, there has to be that sense of emotion and heart that comes from our experiences. So Grow Up, Luchi Zapata. And I just wanted to take a quick moment to define mentor text. And mentor texts are those stories that we can use almost like teachers, that they model what we want to achieve. And we do this a lot as authors and as writers, we do this a lot. We look at what others have done and how they model a craft element that we want to ourselves want to achieve. So for me, Grow Up, Luchi Zapata. So just to tell you a little bit about the book, it is about 11-year-old Luchi, which you see right here, who is incredibly excited about starting middle school because she is finally going to have her best friend since forever, Cami, and her other best friend, Mateo, in the same school. But her middle school dreams go up quite literally in a poof of glitter when her best friend Cami returns from Colombia, completely changed and wanting to grow up a little bit faster than Luchi is ready for. Now, this story was deeply inspired by a lot of personal experiences. And what we're going to discover as we keep going in this craft workshop is that in that pre-writing stage, there's a lot that goes into planning who our characters are. And I drew specifically from experiences that I had, from people that I knew, from myself and my own experiences in creating the trio, and not just Luchi, but also Cami and Mateo. And I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer.
Thank you. I just before I introduce my that feeling of like friendships changing resonates so much. It's like heartbreaking when you feel your friends pulling apart. So I'm so glad that Lucy Zapata is in the world, and that we'll get to talk a little bit more about how Alexandra created that really compelling characters. I am here to share Vega's Piece of the Sky. And this book takes place mostly over one night in the Imperial Valley Desert in California, where I'm from. And a meteorite has just crashed through Earth's atmosphere. And Vega, the main character, once she learns how much a piece of the meteorite might be worth, is determined to find it because she wants to help pay for some new medical expenses that her grandfather is experiencing. And then she also wants to try to help save the family store that her mom has been talking about selling. But Vega's not alone in this quest. So joining her on this hunt through the night to find the meteorite is Jasper, who starts out as kind of a rival to Vega. He and his dad are rock hounds. They go across the country trying to find valuable rocks to sell. And then also Vega's younger cousin, Mila, who's quiet and shy and very anxious. And all of them have their own reasons for trying to find a piece of the sky. And so this book is told from 3 points of view. We get inside the minds of Vega and Jasper and Mila. And to me, the secondary characters in this book are so important to helping draw out the themes, to help Vega's world feel more real, and to kind of give us a glimpse of perspectives that Vega is not aware of. I think I had so much fun writing her, but she's very stubborn, and it's hard for her to see things in any other way than the way she sees them. So by adding in some secondary characters with depth, with their own goals, with their own struggles, that helps the reader sort of see a bigger picture than what you would get if you only were learning about one character. So I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. But first, I just want to remind you to make sure you have some paper and maybe some pens or pencils to write with. I have markers. And with that, I think we're ready to go into the next slide so we can reintroduce our essential question.
And I just wanted to interject just for a moment because Vega's Piece of the Sky is so wonderful. And, we talk about mentor text, right? And I find that Vega's Piece of the Sky is such a wonderful mentor text for me in reading the way you developed each of those characters just so beautifully.
Oh, thank you so much, Alexandra. I'm really excited to hear that. I'm excited to talk more about your amazing books. So our essential question, characters at the heart of stories. So how do writers use character mapping to create multi-dimensional main and secondary characters that leap off the page? Before we dive into that, we're going to go over some key terms so we can head to the next slide.
And I really love that because at the heart, if we don't care about a character, we're not going to want to follow them along in the journey. We have to care about those characters, and we do that by creating that depth. So some of the key terms that we're going to be covering are character traits. So character traits are combinations of details that make a character unique, and they can be both internal, like feelings and thoughts, or quirks, things that make them unique, or it can be external, like their appearance, the way they wear their hair, their fashion choices. Lucci is very colorful. She loves art, and so that reflects a lot in the clothes that she wears. She's very quirky in that sense. That's a character trait. We're going to talk about protagonist, who is the main character in a story. That is who the story is about, who goes on their journey, who has a problem they need to solve. That's who the story is about. And sometimes we can have more than one protagonist, more than one main character. Or sometimes we can have one protagonist and other important characters along the way. We are going to talk about character sketch and character mapping. And these are simply short pieces or graphic organizers that writers use to kind of get their ideas together specifically about who their character is and what they want and what's at stake for them. to learn more about the character's world. And this is important because even though not everything that we brainstorm, that we pre-write about our characters will make it into the final book, everything that we brainstorm about our characters will help us understand how our characters react to the situations that happen or the events that happen in the world and in their story. We are going to talk about three-dimensional characters, and these are characters that are well developed. They resemble real people. So they can act and talk and seem like one of your friends or your teachers or your parents or grandparents or other people in your lives. They are complex with detailed relationships and lives and feelings. And I think this is important because when we read stories, we want to read about real people or characters that feel real, that they can be part of our crew. Go to the next slide.
Just a few more terms for you. So we're also going to talk, and we already have talked a little bit about secondary characters. So these aren't the main character of the story, not the protagonist, as you just heard Alexandra describe, but they're still really important. So they'll appear in multiple scenes throughout the story. And we also want these characters to be three-dimensional as well. If you think to some of the stories you really love, there's probably a main character, but there are probably other characters around them, maybe friends or family members who you could relate to or not, who the main character responds to. And when these characters are three-dimensional, when they have their own challenges and goals, stories can really come to life. Plot is a word you might be familiar with, but if not, plot just refers to the events that make up the story, where the tension and conflict, plot describes what's happening in the story. And stories also have an arc. If you can picture an arc, this kind of traces the changes we see in a story over time. Sometimes writers and others will talk about a character arc. So that would describe, the character starts out one way and believes this about the world, and by the end, they've had all sorts of new experiences that change the way they view things, or they've grown, they've changed in some way. Or you might talk about a plot arc, and then again, that just traces the journey, the ups and downs of the story and what happens in it.
Awesome. And I think we're ready for the next. Awesome. So I'm going to share an excerpt from Grow Up Luchi Zapata, which will serve to hopefully model some of what we're talking about in terms of character development and the ways that we can develop characters in stories. Now, this excerpt starts at a point where Luchi has had one of the worst days of her school career. And it's after all her dreams of having an amazing sixth grade experience, her best friend Cami keeps pulling away. And so not only that, her best friend called her naive. She's forcing her to grow up, and has even been hanging out with some mean girls who've been kind of making some remarks against Luchi's artistic clothing choices, and also mispronouncing her name purposefully and just kind of being hurtful. And so Luchi is frustrated, she is angry, she is hurt, and she's got all these bundled up emotions in her. And the thing about Luchi is that she is an artist and she is athletic. She loves soccer, and those two avenues serve to help her get her stress out and vent her frustration. And so at the start of the scene, she's gotten home with her other friend, Mateo. She is frustrated and she is ready to just leave all that frustration on the field. So they go to the field behind their homes and go have a game of soccer. What I hope that you'll see in this scene is that through the interaction between the two characters, we get a sense of their personalities and who the characters are and what they want. All I care about is forgetting Cami and this terrible day. When we finish, the sun hangs low in a stormy orange glow. We plop down on the grass and sit cross-legged. Good game, I tell him. I needed that. He tips his head back and drains the last of the water. Bad day? You looked like you were about to break the armrest on the way home. I've had better. I grab a handful of grass and pull and toss the confetti of blades over him. Hey! Mateo shakes his head free from the grass. His hair is messy and his face is flushed. When he's done, he says, So really, what's up? I shrug, but before I know it, the feelings from earlier rush out of my mouth. Everything from Cami calling me naive and not returning my texts, to her talking so much with this Melissa girl, gushes out of me. I don't know what's gotten into her, and it's like her trip to Colombia broke something, and I don't know what to do about it. I shake my head. Did I do something wrong? We can go to the next one. We can go. Oh. Nah, Mateo studies his water bottle. Before school started, Mom said that things change in middle school. She said some friendships get stronger, others grow apart. Everyone's trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in. I'm not sure I believe her, but maybe this is kind of like that. But I don't want things to change, I whine. Not with Cami or Mateo. I like our trio, the three musketeers like Papi calls us, the way it is. I miss BC before Colombia, Cami. Will Mateo change too? It's not fair that the one thing we've been waiting for since forever has to change our friendships. We should be able to figure out who we are together. Mateo shrugs. It's not always our choice. My emotions tangle inside me. They feel like glitter in a snow globe that's been shaken up too hard. I yank out more grass and watch it fall when I let go. Finally, I jut out my chin. I don't care. I'm not losing my BFF. Cami might be changing, but she can't simply sweep all our years of friendship under the rug. I'm going to convince her things are just fine the way they are. And we can go to the next slide.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Thank you, Alexandra. In that excerpt, I can really feel Lucci's frustration and like the tangle of emotion, like disappointment, confusion, anger, hurt that she's feeling. And that's just like backed up with that image of glitter in a snow globe, like feeling very chaotic and out of control. So I'm ready to dive in, but just as a reminder, the essential question we're discussing today is this, that characters at the heart of our stories. So how do we use character mapping to create multi-dimensional main and secondary characters? Can you kind of break down for us how this excerpt helps us kind of get into this question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the kind words. So one of the things that I wanted to do with the scene was to really show the characters, who they are. You know, Lucci is stubborn. She's a Leo. She is incredibly stubborn and set in her ways. She doesn't like change. She's actually afraid of changing. And that is very key in who her character is and what her character arc ends up being throughout the story, because she doesn't want things to change. And she reacts emotionally to things. You know, she's very much, and I want to say that I come at it from a heart place. So when I do my character sketches, I look at what the heart of the characters are. And that comes into the what do they want most, but what fuels them? What makes them tick? What are they afraid of? How do they feel in certain situations? And so when doing the character sketches for Lucci and Mateo, I discovered a lot of things about the character and Cami for all three of them. But in this particular scene, I discovered that Mateo is that sensible, logical friend. He is the one who thinks things through, who, when Lucci gets all like, well, I'm going to do all this, he's like, wait, why don't you just talk to her? And in this scene, it really brought out what I had done in those character sketches and the way he reacts, taking what his mom had said and providing that as almost like a sensible guide to Lucci. And then in Lucci's reaction, her frustration, her physical reaction in getting it out on the field, but also in yanking out the grass and just her stubbornness and saying, well, I don't care. I'm not going to let things change. I'm going to take over.
I totally see that. And I think this scene reveals so much about the characters, as you were discussing, but also about their relationship. And one detail that really stood out to me was Lucci like tearing out the grass and sprinkling it over Mateo. And so it kind of like echoes that snow globe glitter. But what I also think it pulls out for me is that you can tell right away that these characters are really close. They've known each other for a long time. You don't just like throw grass at someone you just met or someone you're not close to. Lucci's very comfortable with Mateo. And especially because part of the tension she's having with Cami is Cami's calling her naive and maybe a little babyish. And so to be able to be that playful with someone, which is something that Lucci feels vulnerable about, really helps the reader see that the relationship between these two characters is very trusting. It's very long-standing, and we can kind of get a sense of that, like how much she's lost in the distance with Cami. So you mentioned earlier that the people in your own life often inspire some of your characters and maybe some of the character relationships, but what about feelings and experiences? Did you draw on any real experiences or, friendships changing, like I mentioned, to create this moment?
Absolutely. Most of my stories are inspired deeply by things that actually happened in some way, shape, or form. In this case, initially, the first spark was my son going through his middle school, 6th grade, and him having a friendship breakup. But then the key is that friendship breakup sparked a memory in my own life that in 5th grade, my best friend that I had known since I was 2 years old, she finally came to my school, and I was so excited. And she just didn't think I was cool enough. And so she started joining a different crowd. And I remember those feelings vividly. And I think when we're drawing from that personal experience, we tap into what that feeling, that emotion that came in us, that came up, because it's that emotion that becomes relatable to the reader. And so even though it is inspired by real experiences, it's the feelings that then become universal into the story and that connects with the reader.
Thank you. Well, I'm ready to dive into an activity.
I am too. I think it's ready to get our practice on. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start and create the outline of a possible protagonist for a story. Okay. We're going to go through some of these questions, and I'm going to give you time in between each question to stop and write. Okay. We're going to ignore the slide that comes right after, and we're just going to dive directly here because I want you to spend time with each question before we get on to the next one. Okay. So we're going to be brainstorming a character by creating a short character sketch. And for me, character sketches are a way to brain dump ideas that we have about our character. And we're going to answer who, what, and why. I'm going to guide you in a moment in each of those questions. And in doing so, we're going to try to get to the heart of who our main character might be. So each of you where's my paper? Grab a paper, grab a pen, and we are going to get started. Okay. So the first question I want you to think about is who your protagonist is. And this goes beyond a name and a grade and an age, but I want you to start there. So start thinking about what the name and age and possible grade, if they're in school, of your main character is. If you're not sure where to start with the name of someone that you know. And this is what I do. Lucci is named after my cousin. When I start looking for details, I look around the people that I know and draw those details. But when I say go, I want you to dive deeper. We're going to explore not just on the surface who they are, not just their name and age and grade or what they look like, but also who they are on the inside. So in a minute and a half, I know it's not a lot of time, teachers, remember that if you're watching the recording, you can hit pause and give students more time to write for each of these. But you're going to tell us all that you can think of about this character. Who are they? What are they afraid of? What makes them happy? What or some internal traits. So what is their personality like? Are they shy? Are they curious? Are they creative? Do they have to have everything neat? Or are they messy? So just for as long as you can, just write, brain dump these ideas. Who is your character? Okay. So you're going to have a minute and a half and go. Just write what you can in that minute and a half. Who is your character? Your protagonist? 10 seconds. And we are done. All right, put your pens, pencils, markers down. The next thing that I want you to consider is the question, what does your protagonist want and what happens if they don't succeed? And this question is important because it gets to the heart of the story and your character's arc and your character's journey. And yes, it informs plot because that is what your character will ultimately want to do. But it also tells us a lot about who your character is. It determines what that journey is going to be. So, for example, for Lucci, what she wants most, and characters can want multiple things, but in this case, I want you to think about what they want most. Lucci wants most is to save her friendship. If she doesn't, if she fails, then she might not have a best friend anymore, at least with Cami. If she succeeds, then everything stays the way it is. Okay. So now the question that I want you to answer in a minute and a half is, what does your character want? And what happens if they do or don't succeed? And brain dump your ideas, write as much as you can in a minute and 30 seconds and go. And if you're feeling stuck, you can draw from your own experience. What is something that you have wanted very much? And what happens if you succeed or don't succeed? And that can be your character's want. Five seconds. And stop. And finally, why does your protagonist want what they want? And this is important to fuel your character's journey. Why does Lucci want what she wants? Because she doesn't want to change. She's afraid of change. And so that fear is what is her why, is why she wants to save her friendship, apart from the fact that, she loves her friend very much and doesn't want the friendship to end. But at the heart, it's because she's afraid of that change. So 1 minute, why does your character want what they want? Just answer that question. Whatever comes to mind. There's no right or wrong answers in these. It's whatever comes to mind, and go. Ten seconds. And stop. Shake out those hands. I think we did good. We did good. We got some good ideas, right? Right? And I think we can skip probably to the next two. Sit down. We can get to the next one just as a reminder to where we are. But did you have some good ideas?
I did my best. It's probably really hard to read because I was scribbling. So I think that this is probably a really good thing to say if you're like a newer writer, emerging writer. Sometimes it's hard, and I was having a little bit of a hard time, but I did get words on a page, and that's all you really like. That is the goal, because now I have some ideas and I can make them better. So for who, I was just thinking that it could be cool to write about like an aspiring magician. I have a younger brother who is really into magic tricks, and I just thought like, okay, I could work with that. That sounds fun. Maybe this character, like my brother, is a younger brother who like loves the history of magic. Maybe he's someone who like feels a little underappreciated in his family, or like, I don't know. And so for my what, a couple ideas I had were that maybe this character wants to be admitted to a secret magical society or a secret society of magicians, or maybe he just wants to pull off like a really amazing trick. And so when I was thinking about the why, maybe he needs to pull off this trick because he made a big mistake and he thinks magic is a way that he can fix it. Or maybe he just wants to belong somewhere, or maybe this character feels like they want to live up to their star siblings. So like that was amazing, Alexandra. So we were writing for 3 minutes, and there's so many story directions we could go just with this little character map.
And I love how you model that. When we're brain dumping, we can write whatever comes to mind. So there are multiple possibilities. And then when we hit pause and we can spend more time with it, we're able to then kind of see where our heart is leading us. What story is the one that's calling us to then write it? I want to read your magician story, by the way. Just saying. I hope you all got some starts. And this is really just a start. And from there, we keep writing. I think we can go on to the next slide. And Jennifer.
Cool. I'm excited. Thank you so much. That was so much fun. So I'm going to share a little bit, an excerpt from Vega's Piece of the Sky. This scene takes place in a motel room in Arizona, and it's the morning after the meteorite has fallen. So this scene is told from the point of view of Jasper, who, as I mentioned, is one of the secondary characters. And I'm sharing it because I want to use it as a way to explain how then, taking this character sketch that we started with Alexandra, we can then continue to do some character mapping to create these really three-dimensional secondary characters and show how they add to our stories. So here we go. He had seen it that morning at breakfast, like a flash of light out of clear blue sky, which is what it was actually, and yet it was so much more than that. While sitting in the small motel dining room stirring his breakfast buffet oatmeal, Jasper had tapped on his phone to check the Sky Hunters meteorite forum. He did this mainly out of habit. The posts were rarely very interesting. Someone in Texas had a metal detector to sell. Someone in Delaware thought she had heard a sonic boom. But this post was different. Jasper knew it instantly. He put down his spoon, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and blinked hard to make sure he hadn't imagined it. Sometimes Dad wanted so much to believe in what might be that he couldn't see what was actually right there in front of him. That wouldn't be Jasper. He had promised himself he would never let daydreams trick him into believing they were real. He would always look at things clearly. Brighter than the moon, with a trail of yellow sparks flying southwest toward the Bobcat Mountain wilderness, witnesses report a sound like thunder, followed by whistling and whirring. A space rock, if that's what it was, could not have picked a better time to fall out of the sky. Yesterday at the convention center, Jasper had overheard Scott and Roger Bianchi, who were pretty much celebrities in the rock hounding world, talking about Dad, about how the rocks he was selling weren't meteorites, but meteor wrongs. Everyday Earth rocks that he was trying to pass off as something special. Someone ought to show that guy the door, Scott had said, sneering sideways while Dad was busy with a customer. What they need to do is ban him from ever coming back, Roger agreed. Jasper wished he could explain that Dad didn't mean to cheat, didn't even realize he was. He truly believed in those rocks, despite what anyone tried to tell him, and he wouldn't leave the show until he sold them, or until someone forced him out. Unless maybe Jasper could lure him away with the prospect of finding something even better. There we go. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yep, I was muted. Sorry.
No.
So I was just saying, I love that. And I love how you get just really into the heart of who Jasper is, not just his character, but also the relationship that he has with his dad. Before we dive more into that, though, I want to remind everyone, I think we can go to the next slide, about our essential question, which is that characters are at the heart of stories. And so how do writers use character mapping to create multidimensional main and secondary characters that leap off the page? And as we've heard, in Vega's Piece of the Sky, Jasper is one of three characters that you've dove into. And in this excerpt, we really get a sense of who Jasper is and who his dad is, what their situation is. There's so much that I love about it, but especially the way that Jasper's internal dialogue serves to give us clues about where they are, about the chasing of this dream that is going on. I especially love the line where it says, sometimes Dad wanted so much to believe in what might be that he couldn't see what was actually right in front of him, which I take to be Jasper. He's like, hi, I'm here. And there's this sense of longing in these pages. And even this prospect of the rock, this meteorite that has fallen, it serves as his hope to make things right, to get things to where they should be, where he thinks they should be, to get his dad right and to get their relationship right. And I just love how you do that. And so I was just wondering, that I couldn't help but notice in Jasper's section here and throughout the story, actually, so much of the inner dialogue gives us that depth to that character. What are some of the other ways that you have done, or what are some of the things you've done to help you create depth when you're brainstorming the characters?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's such a good question. Especially, so Vega's the character I came up with first, and she's a really strong character, and she has, she has a strong voice, and so it can be hard to balance that with other people. So just like you did, I had my character sketch of Vega and started thinking about who would help us see things in a different way than her. And so one of the ways that you can kind of help readers see how characters are alike, are different, as you said, is through their internal dialogue, but also it's in how they react to the events that are happening in the story. So these three characters are on an overnight adventure in the desert, which you will probably not be surprised to hear they're very poorly prepared for. So they face a lot of challenges and some potential danger, like flash floods and coyotes and scorpions and things. And because each character comes with different experiences and different temperaments, they react to those challenges in very different ways. So that was one of the ways that I could distinguish them. And another is their vocabulary. So as you probably heard in this scene, going out searching for rocks is very much a part of Jasper's life. They're there in Arizona because they are there for a rock and mineral show. He's listening to experts all the time. So he has a vocabulary for the rocks and how to find them that's very different from Vega's and from Mila's, as you hear. So that's another way, their vocabulary, their word choice, and how they think and speak, that helps to set them apart.
I love that. And I think that's a very key point as for young writers and experienced writers, is that when we're thinking about our characters, both primary and secondary, it's so important to think about the way they talk and their world, and all that influences who they are and how they view and talk about their immediate circles. Awesome. So I think we're ready for our next activity.
Try another activity? Okay. I have a fun one for you. So if you can just at least have access to the character sketch you created with Alexandra, we're going to use that to just inform us. So we were creating some main characters, some protagonists. Now we are going to start developing some secondary characters to really build out that world, and we're going to do it using a bubble map. So the first thing I want you to do is draw a circle in the middle of the page and write your main character's name in the middle of it. So I have a really hard time with character names, to be honest with you, and I didn't come up with them, but that's okay. We can still move forward. So my main character was a magician, and so I wrote that in the middle. I wrote my little bubble around it. So what we're going to do now is to just spend the next minute drawing spokes on that wheel, like that. For other characters who might be in that main character's orbit, who are they interacting with? Who do they see on a day-to-day basis? This could be relatives, this could be friends, this could be rivals, this could be a pet. It doesn't have to be human. So just take a few minutes to quickly sketch out who else is in this main character's world. So we'll just do like a really speed writing exercise for this. So go ahead and start. And let's just come to a stopping place. The point was just to get something down. It's okay if you feel like you're not done, because you can always go back to it. So now what I want you to do, mine is sort of a mess, but I have some ideas, is just to pick one of these. And we're going to spend the next maybe minute and a half. So I will give you a second to pick one of those who you're like most intrigued by as a secondary character. Thinking about what perspective would they have that the main character doesn't, what they could add to your story, what themes they could pull out. And so for the next minute, just think about, what is this character's relationship to the main character? What do they know that the main character doesn't know? How are they alike or different from the main character? If you want, you can go back to the who, what, why questions that we started with to sort of answer those for those secondary characters, or you could just jot down some of your ideas about this character's relationship to your protagonist and how they might see the world in a different way. So I'll give you another maybe minute and a half for that. Okay, and we can stop there. I want to see what Alexandra came up with because she has that.
Oh my goodness, I was like, wait, I wasn't done. Okay, so my main character was, her name is Lily, and she is a musician, and she is in this freshman year of school, and her biggest thing is that she wants the solo in the concert, but she wants it because she just wants to make her dad proud. Her dad is a established musician, and there's more of she's doing it because of him as opposed to because she wants it. But her rival is Gabby. Now, Gabby and her have been kind of frenemies for a while, since middle school. Gabby is, unlike Lily, Gabby's dream is to make it big with music. Like, she wants it. This is for her. She wants to be that musician. She is super focused. And she doesn't feel it's right that Lily, who doesn't really want that world, to get the solo because she thinks she deserves it more. She just knows that about her because they used to be friends. And she's like, well, she gets preferential treatment because her dad's a musician. But what about me? I deserve, because I put in the work, and I'm the one that should make it, basically.
I love it. What I especially love is that you have like the tension on the surface, but I could imagine how like these two characters, even though maybe their goals are at odds right now, could both learn something from the other. So I could see that dynamic and that relationship really propelling the story forward. That's amazing.
I think we both have. And I hope everyone has been getting at least some ideas that even if once this workshop is over, you go back and rewrite some of these things, you have a starting space where you can then move on and develop characters even further. Maybe in writing these secondary characters, you discovered that you're actually drawn to one a bit more. And that secondary character becomes your main character. And that's perfectly okay. I think we're going to move on to the next slide. And yeah, so we're going to recap here just a little bit. The essential question we've been talking about throughout these last 50 minutes has been that characters are at the heart of stories. And how do we as writers use character mapping to create then the multidimensional main character and secondary characters that just feel real and leap off the page? We want, as authors, for readers to care about their story's protagonists, but also the secondary characters. We want readers to root for them as characters, that as their character arcs develop and the plot moves forward. And we want the secondary characters to make a story's world feel real, because if we look around our own worlds, the way we interact with others is real. And so our characters should be doing the same thing. Secondary characters can introduce new themes and new perspectives. And we use character mapping in some way, whether it's as a graphic organizer or through a character sketch, to help develop complex, believable, three-dimensional characters that feel real to the reader.
And then we'll just quickly review some of the vocabulary we talked through earlier on. A reminder that the arc is how the story changes over time, or how a character changes over time. We already talked a lot about creating character sketches and character mapping as a way to first develop a main character, but also to think about who else is in that character's world, who also has a stake in what's happening, has their own wants, needs, goals. We've talked about character traits that are those distinguishing features that really set a character apart and make them feel real, as Alexandra was discussing. We talked about plot as the events that drive a story forward, the tension, the conflict in a story. Protagonist, again, is the main character. Three-dimensional characters are what we're looking to write, but we want our protagonists to be three-dimensional for sure, so that we care about them and care about whether or not they achieve their goal. We want those secondary characters who are also important to this story and help us understand the story's themes and give us new perspective to also be three-dimensional as well. If you are just like itching for more character development activities, we have a couple more for you on the next slide.
So just a reminder, you're always welcome in the recording to hit pause at any stage to revisit the lesson or the what we talked about, or revisit the question, or have more time for writing. But these are 4 questions that we can explore further as writers. So write a short scene with dialogue and action between the protagonist and 1 to 2 secondary characters, kind of like Luci and Matteo. What do their actions and words reveal about their personalities? Write an exchange between the protagonist and another character that includes conflict. Conflict moves it forward. Think about how each character's traits are reflected in their reaction to the conflict.
Another activity you can try to continue exploring and practicing writing characters is to write 2 short diary entries about the same event. So once from the point of view of the protagonist and once from the point of view of the secondary character, how would they view these same events in different ways? That'll tell a lot about who they are, what they believe, and what maybe they should be aware of that aren't, right? What are their what aren't they seeing? What are their biases? And another activity, this is one of my favorites when I'm really feeling stuck, is to think of a story you're already familiar with. So that takes away some pressure of trying to come up with something from scratch on your own. So let's say it's a fairy tale like Cinderella, or a favorite movie you have. And then just choose a scene that's like iconic that you really love, and then retell it from the perspective of a secondary character, someone who's in the background, who's not the main focus of the action. So, for example, how would a stepsister, the wicked stepsister, describe what happens when the glass slipper fits Cinderella's foot perfectly? Or like maybe the cook in the house is kind of watching everything go down from the kitchen. What would they say about it? So that is just another way to put you in someone else's mind and think about secondary characters.
I love that. And I think we have time maybe for like 1 or 2 questions before we wrap up. Maybe, hopefully.
There might be some in the starred column, Alexandra. Oh, here we go.
I love this. From Erica, are the characters in the books based on people you know? Well, for me, yes. For me, even though they are completely different from the real people, they are all inspired by people that I know. So Luci is a combination of me, my son. Matteo actually has a lot from my husband, that sensibility, the humor that sometimes comes at kind of inappropriate times, but just so much about them goes into the stories. But yeah, every character is usually inspired by someone I know.
Yeah, similarly. So like Alexandra, I write mostly what's called contemporary realistic fiction. So that means contemporary means it happens in the now time. And realistic fiction means it's made up, but it could happen. Like this is these books that we're talking about don't have like magic or fairy tale worlds or like science fiction in them. So because of that, I'm also very inspired by things I've really felt or really experienced or seen around me. So my characters are not like carbon copies of people in my life, but there might be a little trait or a little experience that I use as a leaping off point.
Yeah, awesome. So I don't know if we have another question. Oh, yes. So from Julie, as an adult, how do you find your authentic tween and teen voice? I love that question, Jennifer. I don't know if you want to tackle it first.
Sure. Yeah, it's a tough one. I got my start in writing as a journalist. And so one of the really great ways journalism prepared me for being an author, even though I'm writing fiction instead of fact now, was to be a good listener and to hear the rhythms of people's speech and to be listening to like the way they talk, the details they observe. And I really continue to try to be a good listener and hear how tweens or people the same age as my main characters talk and experience the world. So that is one of the ways. And sometimes like I have to keep the characters separate, just write their scenes independently because I get myself a little mixed up. If I am, trying to switch back and forth, they all start sounding a little samey. And similarly, I will sometimes take a break from reading grown-up books because I find that it influences my voice writing for middle grade readers.
Yeah. Awesome. I think I am going to echo what you just said, because I think as writers, it is so important to observe and listen. And so if you're writing for a specific age, listen and observe people in that age and how they talk and how they, I did that with my son as he started middle school, and he would tell me stories. I'm like, tell me again. And I would write things down, and I would just listen and listen and listen. And the voice just, Lucci is probably the one that has leapt off the most. And it was, I think, precisely because of that, because I was observing and listening and hearing him and his friends just talking. But for sure, observing. I think we're getting ready to wrap up. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us online at alexandraalessandri.com.
And at jentorres.com.
And we're just so excited that you were here and sharing this time with us. Reminder, you're always welcome to hit pause as you move forward.
And for even more craft resources, you can check out all of the craft panels at this year's festival, and as well as mini craft lessons on the educator page of the festival website. I hope you do. There's so many amazing creators and authors, educators participating with so many wonderful resources.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.